In my role as a cemetery operations coordinator, I often had to assist people in arranging funerals and plot purchases. One day, Charles, a compassionate man in his 30s, came to purchase a burial plot for his ailing father. Charles had a thick Hispanic accent, and his eyes reflected his caring nature. He shared photos of his father, revealing a sweet, aging man who seemed far too young to be facing the end of his journey. Unfortunately, the days with his father were numbered, and that same week, Charles returned to arrange the funeral at our cemetery. It was a stormy day, marked by dark clouds and heavy rain, which some believed was an auspicious sign. As the hearse and the funeral procession arrived at our cemetery, I stepped outside under the front awning of the office building to observe. I saw Charles sitting in his car behind the hearse, and as our eyes briefly met, we exchanged a solemn wave. The rain beat against the ground like nature's mournful tears. I felt a pang of sympathy for Charles, and I couldn't help but wonder how he was coping with his father's imminent departure. Due to the torrential rain, I remained indoors until the funeral procession was ready to proceed to the burial site. My role involved ensuring that funeral services went off without a hitch. As the mourners gathered by the graveside, I stood nearby with my umbrella, attempting to shield the attendees from the unforgiving weather. The rain continued to pour as we concluded the service, and I couldn't help but admire the resilience of the people who braved the elements to pay their last respects. As the procession left the burial site, I was left alone, the only figure under the bleak gray sky. My job now was to close up the cemetery, a task I had performed countless times. But tonight, under these conditions, it felt more somber than ever. As the evening pressed on, I made one final round through the cemetery in one of our pickup trucks. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and the stormy weather painted the cemetery's tombstones in an eerie, almost otherworldly light. The days were still relatively short, but due to the inclement weather, night had fallen prematurely, cloaking the cemetery in darkness. Driving through the rows of graves, I couldn't shake the thought of Charles and his late father. The storm added an extra layer of eeriness to the surroundings. Every gust of wind and rustling leaf seemed to carry whispers of memories and sorrows from the past. I pushed these thoughts aside, knowing I had paperwork to complete, and the task of closing the cemetery still ahead of me. As the clock ticked towards closing time, the rain continued its relentless assault. I parked the truck and headed for the front gate to ensure its secure closure. I approached it, the sound of raindrops intensifying with each step, my flashlight cutting through the inky darkness to reveal the gleaming metal gate. I locked it securely and glanced at my watch, confirming that the cemetery was officially closed for the night. I turned and headed back toward the office, the distant patter of rain providing a constant, melancholic soundtrack. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure moving among the tombstones. My pulse quickened, and I raised my flashlight, trying to get a clearer view. Despite the pouring rain, someone was hurrying down one of the lanes, heading towards the back of the cemetery. My instincts kicked in, and I honked the truck's horn, a signal that the cemetery was closed. But strangely, the figure kept moving. Determined to ensure that the person was aware of the closure, I stepped out of the vehicle, grabbing my umbrella, and ventured towards the spot where I had seen the figure disappear. My shoes splashed through puddles, and my breath hung in the damp, chilly air. The rain blurred my vision, but I strained to make out any sign of the person. I reached the spot where I had last seen them, my heart pounding in my chest. Peering behind the hedge, I saw only empty ground and a row of tombstones. The figure had vanished, as if it had never existed. Frustrated and perplexed, I spent a considerable amount of time combing the area, calling out in the rain. But there was no response. It was as though the figure had dissolved into the storm, leaving behind no trace of its presence. Discouraged and soaked to the bone, I returned to the office. There, I decided to review the CCTV footage, hoping it would provide some clarity. The storm had hampered the visibility, but the recordings might unveil the mystery of the person I had seen. As I meticulously scrutinized the recordings, I couldn't help but feel that the rain and the darkness had obscured more than just the figure's identity. It had blurred the lines between reality and the eerie, creating an atmosphere that heightened the suspense and mystery. I watched the footage carefully, my eyes darting from screen to screen, looking for any sign of movement or activity. However, the storm had made it difficult to capture any clear imagery. The rain splattered against the camera's lenses, creating distorted and blurry visuals. It was a visual metaphor for the eerie situation that had unfolded. As I continued my review, my phone rang, jolting me from my focused examination. I answered, but the call was met with a strange silence on the other end. The unsettling silence seemed to echo the mystery that had taken hold of the cemetery. My curiosity and unease deepened. I felt a growing sense of foreboding, as if something unnatural had been set into motion. It was as though the storm itself had opened a gateway to the unknown, and I was standing at its threshold. I decided to step outside for some fresh air, despite the inclement weather. The rain splashed against my face, mingling with my anxiety and confusion. The cemetery, once a place of solemnity and reflection, had become an enigma, veiled in darkness and uncertainty. Entering the lobby, I could still hear the faint pattering of rain on the roof, a constant reminder of the tempest outside. As I dried my soaked clothes, I called out once more, this time saying hello, expecting a response from anyone who might be present. But there was only silence, an eerie hush that seemed to stretch into the unknown. It felt as if I was being watched, and the stillness of the lobby only amplified my unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was lurking nearby, hidden in the shadows. As I ventured into the lobby and peered out the windows, I was startled by a figure standing on the other side, staring back at me with a blank expression. My heart raced as I struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. The man's appearance sent a shiver down my spine. He bore a striking resemblance to Charles's late father, the same man I had seen in the photos shared by Charles during his visit. His eyes seemed to hold an unfathomable sorrow, and his presence felt otherworldly, like a specter from the past. Frozen in shock, I watched the man as he continued to gaze at me with an unnerving blankness. His figure appeared to waver, as if his presence defied the laws of nature. It was a chilling sight, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. My phone began to ring once more, jolting me back to reality. I fumbled to answer, but the call ended in an abrupt silence. The disconcerting encounter with the figure outside had left me shaken and confused, struggling to make sense of the inexplicable. Drenched and feeling a growing sense of dread, I decided to investigate the lobby once more, but the man had vanished. He left no trace of his presence, leaving me to question the boundaries between reality and the supernatural. The ominous atmosphere of the stormy night had opened a doorway to the unknown, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had unwittingly crossed its threshold. After locking up the cemetery and driving home, my wife noticed my somber demeanor and inquired about my day. I simply brushed it off as a long day at work, choosing to keep the disturbing encounter to myself. To this day, I grapple with the unsettling memories of that stormy night at the cemetery, unsure if my overworked mind played tricks on me or if something far more mysterious and unsettling had transpired. The rain, the darkness, and the inexplicable figure continue to haunt my thoughts, leaving me with a lingering sense of foreboding and unanswered questions.